here's a question that I have also had for many years since we started this podcast. Okay, so we've agreed that it is acceptable in some cases to do public correction, especially if the poor behavior is being done publicly. Now, the next question would be, okay, if you're going to engage in public correction. Now, first of all, I think it's a big question as to whether or not you should even respond to this thing or not.
Sure.
I think if somebody comes out and puts a hate video out, if they put out a video and say, well, that Joel and Mike, they're a bunch of heretics and stuff, doesn't necessarily, you have every right to defend yourself, but that not every video like that requires a response. Sometimes people are doing hate just to bring attention to themselves and get subscribers and views, and it's just a game they're playing in order to get attention. And I think sometimes it's just better to not give them any attention. And we've had that. I've had that conversation with Brian and David a couple of times. You've had people that just came out and attacked him simply because he's a household name in Grace, and using that name they know is going to get them some views.
And I just wanted to say, if we get attacked for what we're preaching and sharing and teaching, then I want to respond to somebody that, if it's a leader or a teacher or a pastor that's kind of rebuking us in the wrong way, I do want to respond to him openly, so his other people that are listening to this rebuke that this pastor's giving us, I want to respond to that person in truth and in grace, because they don't need to be following or listening to a pastor or a teacher that is, his behavior is like that. That's why I would respond.
So but then there are other cases like this Osteen situation where I think it is actually acceptable if Brian wanted to do it. It's a healthy, acceptable to defend himself, or just have others defend him, because there are so many of these videos, and there's so much. Some ground is probably being gained on that part because of mischaracterizations, misrepresentations, and outright lies about Brian. So in this case, I would think that it would be acceptable to do public correction. So on that point, I think with the videos you've done, if you go to Hope Under Fire and you listen to Nate, he's got 6, 7 videos analyzing just a couple of
seven right now. One comes up tomorrow morning.
Yes, he's got one tomorrow morning too.
I want to listen to that.
And Nate will calmly, for the most part, he will calmly deconstruct some bad argumentation. When I was listening to Nate yesterday, Lori heard him. She's like, "Oh, he's good. He's good at how he just calmly breaks down bad argumentation." And I think seeing that in Nate is just a refreshing. It is an exemplary kind of manner that I'd like to see more of by people in Grace. Just forget about the emotional. You're really triggered by the lies that are being said. Just calmly, with critical thinking, deconstruct the bad argument. That's all you need to do.
Amen. Absolutely.
And the other thing too, Mike and I came to this. We've come to this understanding over the years, was that I can't help but think of how Paul responded to these sorts of situations when he went to Jerusalem. There's all these false accusations. There's all this nastiness. He's in front of Agrippa, and what does he say? He says, "I think myself happy." He was happy to be in the middle of that conflict, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. So the response to nasty lies, false accusations, you're happy for the opportunity to be able to share the truth. So the other point is, I want to compliment Nate on the use of Galatians 6:1. He went to that in the early verses. I think that is a prime model that should be really considered when you're in this position of defending yourself and possibly doing some sort of public correction, you have to remember that if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. So just because you're in the act of doing public correction does not mean that you are superior to the other person, that you have not made mistakes, that you haven't been hypocritical in your own walk. But this is about us. This is about us helping each other to align our earthly walk with our heavenly ministry.
Yes.
You know, it is for that, and it is for the good of Osteen that you would do a public correction as much as it would be for everybody else who's listening to him and listening to you. I've talked too much, Nate.
No.
Do you have a reaction to these thoughts? What are you thinking about this whole subject?
Well, obviously, when we look at it, I think Christ really put a heavy burden on false teachings and stuff like that, and saying that this is a serious problem, right? You know, it's better that a millstone be hung about his neck than to offend one of these little children. Right. I think that when you get into that, and we just did this recently in our men's Bible study, we started in the Gospels and just working through all the way through Revelation, all the instances either Christ or the disciples or Paul talked about, you know, these sort of false teachers that are going to come in teaching these things, and how big of a problem it really was in the past and now and in the future and in the next dispensation and everything else. So this is never going to go away. This is always a problem, and it's a serious problem. And I think God takes it seriously. At the end of the day, sin is sin, I think, and we can try to categorize it different ways, but I think ultimately, you know, when it comes to teaching, that sin, I think, has a bigger impact down the line because it starts influencing how people act. Doctrine always affects your actions and attitudes. At the end of the day, so how your theology goes, so goes the way you act.